Good evening, everyone. I'm Alvin King, and welcome to a new episode of He Said, a look at the world from a seasoned Black man's perspective. This is our pre-Halloween show, October 27th, 2023. Come on in and join the show. Hello. I told you guys, it's our pre-Halloween show. Welcome to a new episode of He Said. Our show tonight, crisis management. And, I don't look at this mask. I'm not really in a crisis, but there are many types of crisis, ladies and gentlemen. We all deal with them. Health, finance, relationships, family, you name it. And with each of them comes trauma. Our show tonight is all about dealing with trauma, and there was no better way to get the conversation going than to have with us Cory George, author, mental health mental health and trauma expert, is back with us to talk about this very important matter. And for those of you who follow us, we were going to have a double header tonight because, again, crisis management falls in many categories. But our financial guru, Randy Jones, will be here next week, and he will continue this conversation about crisis management. So if you guys are ready, we're ready to bring the guys on. Can we get on with the chat? Oh.
It's me. Don't be scared.
Let me get out of here.
Black Panther has arrived.
You all are fools. Hey, Monica. Good evening, guys. You know
what? Let me get it together now.
That's right. We got to this is live.
Together
TV. That's okay. You're not gonna be wearing no mask, But
okay.
Okay. Now take your mask off. I'm sorry.
You hear how he talks to you, Bobby?
Hey, Meat.
How's everyone doing tonight? You guys good?
Yes. How are you?
I'm doing good. Considering all that I have going on in my life, this show was so appropriate to have tonight. I think everyone's dealing with some type of crisis, no matter, where they are. And, how you deal with them, with what you're going through is so very important. So I honestly didn't know that I was going to be in this place where I am today. But, again, having you here and talking about what we're going to talk about is really cool. So
absolutely.
And there are quite a few crises.
There are. In spite of the fact that it was a beautiful day here in the District of Columbia of almost 80 degrees, over actually 80 degrees, kind of unusual for this time of the year. But in spite of that, yes, absolutely. There are a number of issues happening around the country that we wanted to touch base on. The first of them being the very, very unfortunate shooting rampage that took place up in Lewiston, Maine, earlier this week, leaving 18 innocent victims dead. The oldest one, 37, the youngest one, 14. Robert Card is 40 years old, is the name of the shooter, who actually is an Army reservist who was sent to the hospital for medical psychiatric treatment earlier this summer, which raises the question as to how this person was able to obtain a gun, because apparently he did not too long ago actually acquire a shooting mechanism, and one is questioning if he indeed was literally officially checked into a psychiatric ward just several months ago. how is it possible that he has access to the weaponry that he has and causing such mass casualties?
It
I
really
just
is truly sad. And I don't understand. We're going to talk about this particular person in just a second, but I don't
Yes.
understand how people are not looking at our gun violence epidemic as something that requires a multifaceted approach to resolving it. Not
Absolutely.
only is it just gun control, but there's a look at the psychiatric needs that have been ignored in this country since the Reagan times.
Absolutely. And we want to all too often simply look at it from one perspective of the psychiatric condition of a person, but it also has to do with the access to that level of weaponry.
Right.
There was a suicide note recently found, I've been told, and the secure in place, the shelter in place has recently been lifted in Maine as well. His vehicle was found near a river, and it is my understanding that they are now also actually checking the river to see if there is a possibility that he might have taken his life, and could be found there. But it is such a
sad.
troubling and concerning, as Alvin was saying before we went on the air. He went into a bowling alley and started
Right.
shooting innocent victims. Alvin is a bowler. He enjoys hanging out with friends and bowling. We were just talking about the fact that whether it's a church or school, there is simply no place that is seemingly sacred from gun violence anymore.
Or the U.S. Capitol.
Absolutely.
I mean, so yeah. I mean, again, this is one of these mass shootings that, again, has hit me kind of personal because, again, I typically look at a bowling alley as my safe space,
Yeah.
and that now is taken away. So,
Yep.
praying for all of those in Maine. Boddie, thank you for sharing that story.
Absolutely.
That's I don't even have words.
Yeah. Our prayers go out to them. Yep.
To everyone involved. I have something a little, some might say even scarier and more tragic to talk about.
Whoa.
And that is that there has been a new Speaker of the House voted in on Wednesday, and his name is Mike Johnson of Louisiana. Now, for those of you who do not know who this man is, I'm just going to say first and foremost that he has been nicknamed Mike Jordan in a suit.
Wow.
Now, for those of you who may not know all of who Mike Jordan is, I'm going to lead with the thing I was going to end with, which was that this guy, Mike Johnson, who is, one of these really conservative, even MAGA type level Republicans, who's always talking about states' rights. Do you know that this man led the charge to try to overturn the 2020 election? He led the organization of the amicus brief to the Supreme Court in support of Texas's lawsuits asking the court to halt the certification of the vote in Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin.
And he is number 3. And he is now number 3.
He is
in line for the presidency.
Yep.
And he is, big time. And if you see any of the coverage of the press conferences after he was elected, there was a reporter who asked him, like, what role did you have? And all of the Republicans were like, oh, shut up, just be quiet now, don't talk about that. And he completely skirted the answer in a way that was very sinister looking to me, and so that's just one part of who he is. Last year, he introduced a bill similar to Florida's Don't Say Gay law. He is against marriage equality. He doesn't want there to be any money spent doing anything that's going to be helping LGBTQI people. He's staunchly against Drag Queen Story Hour, and we still have not really gone into that. But he is very, very pro-life and against a woman's right to choose. And I am certain that he would support a federal ban on abortion from day one.
Right.
So he is also, that's enough.
Yeah, there are a number of issues that are concerning with him being in that position. Absolutely.
Absolutely scary. And as Bobby said, and Vash said, ladies and gentlemen, this person could be the next vice president of the United States.
Yes.
That's how he's positioned. So
y'all got to vote, because he is definitely going to be coming after your voting rights as well.
He's an
Oh,
absolute
absolutely.
he's
Absolutely.
an absolute monster.
Absolutely.
Well, this week, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys. This week, we lost a true trailblazer. Richard Roundtree passed away this week. If you all don't know him, he was Shaft. Okay, and in my opinion, Richard Roundtree epitomized Black manhood on screen when we so desperately needed it. The strength, the authority, the mystery, and the
Dignity.
ownership
Yes.
of sexuality, it just seared through the screen and into our lives. And he left us all with that. And so when I heard that he passed away, Richard Roundtree was like the man, the actor, and I still think when you hear Shaft, doesn't it sound new? Yeah. I can't sing it because we might get in trouble. But don't right.
Oh, that Shaft was a bad mother.
That's when I had the fro and
yeah. He was just bad, and I still buy clothes when I think of him. I think of him when I buy clothes because he just had the look that I want to know better. And
swag.
So rest in peace.
That's Jordache.
Rest in peace, Richard Roundtree.
Rest in peace.
We got to say hello to our viewers. Michelle, Michi, thank you for being here. Monica, Troy has joined us.
Hey, everybody.
George has joined us. Thank you all for being here tonight. We have a very, very important show, and we are so fortunate to have, this gentleman who I'm about to introduce. He is back with us, and if you guys are ready, I want to go ahead and start the show because we got a lot that we want to unwrap with him. And I want to get into this topic of dealing with trauma. Okay. Yep. All right. So are you guys ready?
Ready.
All right. All right. Our special guest, Cory George, is a nationally recognized mental health and trauma expert, award-winning television personality, author, and multimedia producer whose work has been featured on Fox, CBS, NBC, and Huffington Post Live, as well as being a featured interventionist on the A&E original series Digital Attraction. George is also the recipient of the 2023 U.S. Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award for volunteerism, and he will get that award this year.
Excellent.
He has committed his life to the ministry of helping hurt people to live bigger than their baggage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the He Said stage, Mr. Cory George.
Yay!
Hey, Cory. You are
bigger than their baggage. That's what I'm talking.
Almost, there you go.
Okay. Hello.
Hey, Cory. Thanks for joining us again, man. I'm sorry. Ever since I met you, and there are other folks that we've had on the show, you are in my top 5 people when we talk about trauma that I love to have come on the show. So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you.
You are so welcome. And it's always funny because I write my own bio. So when people read them, it humbles me because I have to remember what I've done because it's about the work, right? So I'm like, oh, that's me. But thank you. And speaking of that award, I get that award in 3 weeks. And so I'm scrambling for outfits and all this stuff. And
because the right outfit makes a statement. So I know you're going to bring it to, you're going to have it together.
I've been consulting fashion friends because I am the dad of the group. So my fashion friends and my kids will tell me, nah, that's not it. And who can, we need people like that in our lives, right?
Absolutely.
Honest connections. And we'll talk about why these great connections are important when you're dealing with or you are on the tail end of having experienced trauma. But I want to jump in really quick, guys. You guys talked about the new House Speaker, right? I want to let people know that even that can be traumatic.
Absolutely.
And let me tell you how. Because if his work is associated with hurting people and exposing people of a certain culture, of a certain group, it's almost like me being Black and me being stopped by the police. If there's a propensity that this person has a chance to inflict something where there's laws or other things that can cause a trauma or a body of trauma to certain people that I can identify with, his election could be traumatic. That's how invasive trauma looks that people don't think about. So,
wow.
Yeah. Because now in the days of shared information, in the days of the internet, we have shared trauma now. Back in the day, that wasn't a really big thing. Now is because now we can see the police brutality. Now I see that young man looks like me. But guess what? Now I see a young man that looks like my son, or it looks like my uncle. So now everybody is linked. And this is how deep that trauma runs. I may have never been assaulted by a police officer, but the last time I stopped, I had anxiety, and my son, who was 14 at the time, asked me, "Dad, are you okay?" I had a trauma response, but I never experienced trauma directly. And this is how, when we define trauma, you could either be the direct victim of it or you could witness it. And so we thought that witnessing it, that, oh, if you're sitting across the street and you see somebody shot, right? No, it could be witnessing the whole repeated effect of something that you can identify with that feels like it puts you at risk. So therefore, Black people are always under anxiety more than ever now.
Well, that's why we got you here, because we got something. We want people to know specifically about trauma. And I know that you know that there are different types of trauma. But I want to say that I found out that 70% of adults in the United States have experienced some type of traumatic event at least once in their lives. And that is 223.4 million people. And then I found out that approximately 60% of Americans have experienced at least one adverse experience during childhood. So, Cory, I want to ask you, I know that there are different types of trauma, but I have heard recently that there are 3. Can you tell us what those 3 are and why they are important?
Absolutely. So let me pivot back to one of those statistics. So that, well, actually 2. So the 70% is actually, it's also true for us in the US, but it's worldwide too. So it mimics. But the 60%, the reason why that's important for us to understand having an adverse childhood issue is that we have something called ACEs, and it measures how many of those events that a child has had between the age of infancy and 18. And I think it's up to 10 examples. So for everyone that you can add on to that list, it's sort of a predictor of what their future outcomes may be. It may raise chances for teen pregnancy, may raise chances for being assaulted in life, or actually being a perpetrator. It can also raise the chances of you also experiencing mental health issues, as well as being on the cusp of suicide. So when we do these evaluations, especially with children, and now they're doing it more in hospitals, we want the ACEs score, because then we can kind of understand what that whole trajectory is. And also that ACEs score, it can also actually serve as a predictor for health ailments as well, such as diabetes, heart disease, all these things. And the reason why is trauma is not just a mental thing. The fact that if you experience trauma and the stress associated with it, your body has to release several hormones and neurotransmitters just to calm it down. And that's meant only for survival. So back in the day, you only dealt with it for a brief minute, then your body calmed down again. But let's say a culture who always feels like they're under attack, and let's take a war-torn country. You have to watch where you walk every day, because you may be blown up by a landmine. How many hormones and those neurotransmitters are being flooded in your system every second you walk out the door until you get where you're going? Too much of that can damage organs. It can damage so many things. That's why some people can't have children, male and female. That's why you may have those gastric issues, those back pains, those joint pains. That's why you may raise your chances of having diabetes, having the hypertension and all that. So I want to make sure that we get all of that good stuff out, so that way people can understand. But the reason why I advocate so much for healing is that I want you to save your life. This is not about just being mentally clear. This is about saving the chance that your quality of life as you age will be so much better. So to answer your question directly, we do have 3 types. So the acute trauma is usually for like a single instance trauma. So let's say a car accident or something that happens in this one time. Then you have the chronic trauma, and that's trauma that happens over like an extended time. And so let's say it's maltreatment and or something like domestic violence that may happen over a stretch of time. Then we get into what we call complex trauma. So complex, it can look 2 different ways. If it happens in childhood, the issue with trauma in childhood is that it can have a severe effect on on your development because your brain is forming at the same time. And not just the brain, but your identity, your self-awareness, yourself against the world and who you are. It can change the context and it can make you believe that the outcomes are part of your personality when it's not. There are some people I've worked with that didn't realize that their whole personality was a trauma response, and I had to help them learn themselves all over again. But another example of that is if you're going through a trauma that is so evasive, but let's say you're being tortured over and over again, or you have multiple traumas. And so let's say you dealt with stuff in childhood, and guess what? If you don't handle that stuff in childhood, it raises your chance of being victimized again in adulthood. Because as a survivor, I can tell you one of the examples was, and this is kind of this would probably be more relatable to folks in the audience. Oh, if I can deal with that in the past, then I can deal with this. But not being aware that both instances are not good for you. So for example, I know someone personally that had dealt with domestic violence for a while. She ended up finding a great man, but the problem was he didn't hit her. She had wrapped her coping skills around being so prepared to deal with the trauma. She couldn't deal with the man that did not inflict trauma. So she was almost forcibly asking him to do something so she can enact those coping skills because she didn't have any other skills of dealing with peace. So her whole life was wrapped around trying to cope with trauma.
Wow.
So this is why having the understanding and the basic psychoeducation is what I applaud, is because when we get the language, now we can call it a thing.
Wow.
Okay. Wow.
You mentioned the election of the new speaker as a potential form of trauma. Are there other forms of trauma that aren't typically, examples of other forms of trauma that aren't typically considered trauma? Traumatic, rather.
Racism and discrimination, especially if it's still happening. So not only do I hear about my great-grandmother's issues and the slaves that were in my family line, but now I'm looking at how they deal with me today.
Yes.
So I have an attachment, and because it's not stopping, it can still be considered a trauma for you because you have to brace for it, right? So you have to brace for it. So how many of us who may be of color walk into a room of white people and say, or right before you walk in, there's a demeanor shift that you don't even realize you're doing.
Right. Yeah. Coping skills. Yep.
And you hope that you can get through as best as you can.
Yeah.
And so even something as serious as an abortion is traumatic, but depending on the reason why and all those things. Job loss is traumatic, especially if it's sudden, and especially if you already had those financial issues that you guys were kind of hinting at the financial crisis. If you suddenly lose your job, that's why some people went home and killed themselves.
Yeah.
Even in the mortgage crisis, folks were losing their homes. Guess what? Folks were on the edge. So there's so many different types of things. And now because the world is the way it is, we have new traumas. Because I've never lived through a pandemic. I never had to experience a pandemic. Every year it was a flu breakout, right? So you worried about the flu, and most people didn't pass away from that. But if you were sick, if you lost friends and family during that time, if you lost your job, if your life changed, because some people didn't know how to cope being home by themselves because their social life was their coping skill and they didn't know it.
Right.
So no, you're not the life of the party. You were running away from your life at the party.
I'm listening to you, Cory, and I just had a 2-part crisis issue that could have brought on trauma. Yeah. Just dealing with all the information that was being fed to everybody about the government shutdown that didn't happen. The way the media was pushing it out to people. There were people who I know are, they're pretty financially set in a way, but the way the media was putting it out was like, it gave me trauma because it started me feeling, like, wait a minute, I think I've done all I could do to at least go a month or two without it. But just the media's coverage.
Absolutely. But you know why? Because we had it before. Yeah, because we had it before. And we know how that turned out. So we had an experience with it. And even if you don't work for the government, you know somebody who was affected.
Absolutely.
And you may have had to support somebody who was affected because it may have been your wife or your partner, your spouse. So even though you were not directly affected, it's going to affect your home. It may affect your relationship. You may have to go call your mom and see, and see if she's okay because she's been in there for 40 years. And So yeah, because we have a past experience with it, and we can still recall how we felt. And the thing about trauma is, or trauma memories, is that when when you have a trauma memory that is triggered, you have the same reactions, you have the same feelings and sentiment that happened when you had the experience. So that's why some people who break down or who have what looks like an outrageous experience, I always say this: ask them how old they were when the trauma happened. If you're 50 and it happened at 8, that's an 8-year-old in their corner.
Yeah.
They had to revisit that age group. So while some people say it's irrational, I give them tools and say no. Per the circumstance and the age and your development level, what you're doing is appropriate. Don't let anybody tell you that you're having inappropriate feelings about it. And so these are ways that we kind of help to normalize, especially for Black culture. I spend a lot of time with Black men to help them normalize that your reactions are on par with your experience. Now that we've kind of taken that toxic part of what we think men should look like in the face of danger and all this, then we can start some healing work.
Yeah. Amen. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Well, so many things, because you guys are saying so many amazing things. When it comes to the media, I think it's important, though, for everyone to realize that I think we've shifted from the sex sells approach that the media has had to reaching us to trauma sells.
Yeah.
And they lead with that so much these days and if they can combine sex and trauma, hot diggity dang. It's like,
I was talking to a journalist a few years ago, and he said he quit because the way that they wanted him to frame a story in a Black neighborhood was to get the lowliest looking person to talk about it. And this is how media can shift the whole perception of another person.
Absolutely.
And and also when you look at certain things, especially when it's a white person who commits a crime, they really go into their background, like almost trying to humanize them.
Always.
But when it's us, but somehow they find a mugshot or they find something that really isn't favorable to almost make it as so we were born to do these things, and that it works.
It's a similar type of investigation, but with a different outcome. Theirs is to almost justify. Right.
And there was an example I used. If a Black man goes to rob a 7-Eleven with a butcher knife, my expert opinion is something's wrong with that Black man. First of all, thinking it was okay to use a butcher knife. So you can arrest him, that's fine. But let someone do a mental evaluation to see if prosecution is justified, or does he need some other type of mental health type of intervention. Well, I did my studies because I'm in my doctoral studies, and I love the fact that I get to research. As compared to white counterparts, Black people normally do not get mental health services as part of their plea deal. Now, there's factors that may that you think that you may not be able to afford the right attorney, and that's not always the case because some of those who work for you in the court can also be on the side of that racism as well, and push you to settle for a deal instead of trying to get you the help. Because guess what? If you have schizophrenia and you throw me in prison, I have a new trauma to add on top of the schizophrenia.
Absolutely.
Those inmates don't know what to do with that if I'm triggered. And guess what? I'm at risk of being hurt or killed. Yeah. That's the daisy chain of how it is for us.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I have a question for you. What are some misconceptions about trauma?
I think that the misconception is once you experience trauma, that it will always be an experience that you live through. And so the truth is, although 70% of people experience it, a lot of people will rebound naturally.
Really?
Yes. So it's not everybody who experiences trauma will have this deep trauma experience. So for the first 30 days, we kind of monitor you. If you're experiencing a certain set of symptoms, we may diagnose you with acute stress disorder. That's something right before having been diagnosed with something as post-traumatic stress disorder, but they're not always one and one. That's the first 30 days. So once it goes over 30 days, and sometimes it doesn't show to up to 6 months, you can then be diagnosed with that. And so I believe I think up to 20% of the 70% who have experienced trauma will be diagnosed with that And that's a severe form of anxiety that's associated with the trauma as well. But but also we have anxiety, we may have depression, we may have all of these new things that pop up because of how we may be unable to cope on our own, or even with our support system as well too.
Well, it sounds like those traumas that you talked about and your diagnosis within a certain length of time is trauma that is experienced now as adults. And earlier you were talking about trauma that might be
kids too, but they're diagnosed a little differently because of the developmental level.
Well, let me finish what I was going to say.
Okay,
so it's trauma that's experienced like right now versus trauma that's been experienced in the past that we are tripping over and needing to diagnose.
It depends.
Okay. I mean, if you're talking about diagnosing it within 30 days or 60 days, that's recent trauma versus prior trauma.
Well, yeah. So prior trauma, even if you've had prior trauma, over years and years, we can still diagnose you with having the same thing. It's just that somebody just was not aware. And also in some cultures and communities like our own, what we call trauma can be a little bit more extreme than the average, right? So if you live in a low income area where you experience gunshots often, where you see gang activity, where there's actually trauma happening right in front of you, going to and from school, you may not realize that you've adapted to it and you are living a traumatic lifestyle every day. So for that person or that community, you may have to hear bombs going off in order to think something's wrong, or something really galvanizing, instead of what I'm looking at. It's like, no, I'm looking in your neighborhood. And I mean, I was at a school and I was working there, and I said, oh my God, these kids have dealt with some type of trauma because of their reactions and how they show up at 8 o'clock in the morning on 10. I'm not even on 5 at 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't even know how they're on 10 and cursing and reacting and fighting. I'm like, this is 8:30 in the morning. Who is not having these conversations about the trauma-informed care, or even finding out that you want me to treat these kids with basic stuff, but they need more than that. And so, and so we have to look at this in terms of your community as well. So it's not just individually, but you can have a whole community that's dealt with trauma, a whole community. And then how do you band together and kind of start the healing? So when you look at floods, but such as Katrina and all the displacement and the loss of homes, when you look at other natural disasters, all these other things, those are community things. Those are big, big picture things where it needs more than me. It may need about 100 of me in that community, to start helping that healing process.
To deal with all that. Cory, you early on, I heard you, but you kind of went over ACEs, and if you could just take a moment, I want to have you tell the viewers, what is ACEs again, and what is the importance of understanding one's ACE score?
Okay, so first, ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, and so it's a list of different questions, and they'll ask you, have you experienced certain things? I believe it's 10 questions. Based on the number, that dictates possible outcomes for your future life and your So like me, when I did my ACEs, I think I had 4 or 5. And I'm very transparent about them. So I mean, I had childhood rape, I had abandonment, I had grief, like very early in my life, bullying. I've been attacked by a kid gang, and this was all before the age of 15.
Wow.
Well, it's no surprise now that now that I'm diabetic. It's not just because of a lifestyle, it's because of all the stuff that hadn't been dealt with, and now it's showing up. And it's not to say that it can't be reversed, but once you identify it, it gives us the material to say, okay, how do we put these things in place to be proactive for this child's healing and this child's progress and maturation from now through their lifetime.
So given, no, I'm sorry, you go ahead.
No, go ahead, Bobby. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so obviously our listening audience is not an adolescent group. They're mature folks and so forth. We're at a different stage in our lives. Can you talk to us about risk and protective factors as it relates to trauma?
Well, but also I would urge those who are listening about ACEs, but to do your own ACEs because it's a free form. You can download it. Find out where you stand, because some people may not understand why they're dealing with certain health ailments right now. Or
so this is an exam that is easily accessible to folks.
Absolutely, yeah. Online, it's a form. It's nothing complex, and you can ask yourself those questions, and it gives you the legend of, okay, if you had one experience, you had 4. It shows you what the possibilities are.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, co-host, we need to do our ACEs.
If I wasn't scared of cutting us off, I promise you I would go and search it and put the link up there.
Don't do it. Wait,
I'm afraid that if I move if I do something crazy, we will lose Cory.
No, don't do it now. Just wait.
Okay.
Yeah. So so some of the risk factors, and these are things that that raise the propensity of someone having to deal with trauma, or if you deal with it, it may have worse outcomes for you. We have to look at the family structure. How cohesive is the family structure? Are we talking about things? My kids know we talk about everything, and I don't even want to, but we have to, because mine didn't. We have to look at the person's support system, because we know scientifically that if you go through something and you're able to have a good ground of support,
yes,
that will help you to possibly not develop anxiety and or depression. So so lack of that is a risk factor. You want to look at where you live, and so basically, as I talked about those neighborhoods, that's a risk factor. So look at where you live. Also, you have to look at your educational level, because sometimes being unaware of something and not being educated about it, and sometimes education leads to that whole awareness. You can put yourself at risk because you're not aware. You can look at your own developmental level. Somebody who may be 18 in age, but maybe 12 in the developmental level, they can possibly be taken advantage of. Also, if you dealt with if you experienced a prior trauma but did not deal with it in a healthy way, it raises your chances of being a victim again. And so those are some of the also we also want to look at what are the resources in the neighborhood in terms of mental health, in terms of healthcare, too. And so we would look at protective factors. These are things that, if they're in place, they will lessen the probability of you experiencing trauma or not suffering as long or as much as possible. So we go back to having that healthy support system, having that safe space in the families and in your communities where you talk about things. Also being educated about trauma, so just like my spiel earlier, these are things that people should know. It's like, no, that is trauma. How are you dealing with that at home? And then also understanding in terms of protective factors, are you okay talking about your issues? Because most cases, if we're in families that don't naturally breed that type of conversation.
Yes.
So for me, I ask my kids every day, my youngest is 16, if I have to get him from school, how was school today? And so the best part of school, the worst part of school. Why is that your favorite teacher? And so why don't you like math? Because you may find out that your child is failing math because they're being bullied, not because they can't do the work. And if you're being bullied, that takes your mental processes to deal with that, and you may not be able to concentrate. You may not be able to have focus. So those are some of the risks, and also some of the basic factors that we can use to try and not just to protect ourselves, but our families and also your community.
Cory, I just want to say very quickly, Vash, I know you're coming in, but I just want to say very quickly that the he said listening audience is responsive. We just had someone cite Rodney in Philadelphia. He's taken his ACEs while we were doing the show.
Awesome. And Norman, our producer, has put up a sample form. If you click on it, if you're one of the viewers, you can click on it. And Norman is our producer, ladies and gentlemen. He's not some person that I made up and put on here.
He's the Oz of the show. He's behind the curtain.
Norman has put up a sample. Actually, he said questionnaire. If you want to take a look. But thank you all. Thanks everybody. Thank you.
And I'm going to let you guys know right now that co-hosting a show with Bobby is not on that list. So if that is what you're looking for, I'm letting you know now that that's not there. But Rodney said that he did his, and his score was a 3.
Yeah.
So Cory, I mean, just so we can really engage with our audience here. is a score of 3 something of concern? Like, do we want to talk about that? Rodney, do you want to share what your experiences were? Like, how do we make the most out of this experience right now?
This interactive experience right before us.
Well, I would say that. Well, so when we look at the score of 3, we look at it as an intermediate risk. It's not something that is like, oh my God, we have to run around and call psychologists, call a doctor. It is saying, be cognizant and be aware of your mental state, because whatever you've gone through, I always urge people on occasion, ask yourself, how are you doing today? I often ask my kids and my friends, how are you feeling? I change the sentence, because if you say how you doing, Black people will okay us to death. But if you ask somebody how you feeling, that's very pointed. That's very in the moment. And it also promotes mindfulness. If I'm asking Alvin how you feeling, Alvin has to answer for right now.
Right.
How you feeling? Mm-hmm. And Alvin, I know you and I share some things. I ask you, so how are you feeling? Mm-hmm. Because we could be feeling anything at any moment, and that can change. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and so a score of 3, that's kind of, it's not alarming. If you had 5, 6, or 7, then I'm saying, okay, we need to figure out where you are, because you've had so many experiences. What does your quality of life look like right now?
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna call you for dinner, Rodney, because you a 3. So when I come to Philadelphia, I'm calling you for dinner. So thank you for sharing that. Because if it was 7, I'm be like, you know what, Rodney, I might have to take it.
My God.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I love Rodney.
But that shouldn't negate a particular experience that someone may have had that could have been so high or so traumatic for them that it is beyond just the numeric score.
Yeah, and that's really when we see the symptomology play out in everyday life. So it's like, if I see that you're like, if there's a visible way or me hearing it, I don't need an ACEs. I need to get you I need to get you some help. And the cool thing about the ACEs score is when you download the entire form, you can then look at the number and it'll tell you exactly some of the ailments and some of the things that you may encounter in terms of your mental health and physical health. So that's a great thing. And then you may realize, wow, I do have experiences in some of these things. So perhaps it wasn't just that I'm alive. It's just that this stress is affecting me. And sometimes, especially if it happens in childhood, we grew up not realizing that was trauma. Mm-hmm. We thought it was a way of life.
Yep.
And the biggest indicator is, and this is something I want to tell your audience, is that, as a child, so when you cope with trauma, you only have a limited means of coping because you're under the care of somebody else mostly. Yep. So most children either have to deal with it, they have to normalize it so they can get, and so they can make it through the day. They avoid it, they may shut down, they may scream and holler. Mm-hmm. Well, the issue comes in when you become an adult and you haven't dealt with that. Mm-hmm. And you get with other people as an adult, when your job then is to have healthy relationships with other people.
Come on now.
And if you scream and holler, if you shut down, if you normalize that skill of coping and you bring it into adulthood, it no longer serves us well. So the biggest thing is what works for childhood doesn't always work for your adult relationships. So if you find yourself, or you've been told, wow, so you kind of act childish, I want you to think about that.
And stomp and go, no, I don't.
Okay. I hope you all are listening to what he just said, because that was very direct.
It was.
Okay, that was very direct, and I hope you heard what he just said.
And I hope you noticed which 3 of the co-hosts responded immediately.
Well, look, ladies and gentlemen, we have to keep the show moving, and we have to get to the second part of our show, and that is, Cory is going to give his opinion on 9 of the daily coping mechanisms that you can use with dealing with trauma.
Absolutely.
But before we do that, we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we will share with Cory those 9 points, and he'll elaborate. So don't go away.
Stay tuned.
Congratulations and happy 195th anniversary to the NNPA, to Dr. Chavis, to all of the leaders. As we know, our Black press has been the voice, the trusted voice of the community. It has been the trusted voice for the nation in terms of speaking of and about with knowledge and with respect what is happening in the community. The Black press will tell the stories that need to be told and often by other press outlets is not being told but directly impacts so many people. And so I applaud the Black press for all that you do. I know that through the course of the last 2 years, it has been a real effort because so many of our Black newspapers and publications are also family-owned businesses, small businesses, and the challenges that come, and in particular in the last 2 years that have come with that. So I just want to thank you for your endurance, for your strength, but your voice is so incredibly important, especially when I think about this moment in the history of our nation. 195 years celebrating an anniversary, and now more than ever, in a very different way, we are dealing with so much misinformation, inaccurate information, the dissemination of hate speech, and so much that is incorrect and wrong. There are people who want to deny history, who don't want to teach history, which reinforces, as much as it ever has been important, reinforces the importance of our Black press. So happy anniversary.
Welcome back, everyone. And we're going to say thank you, Madam Vice President,
HU
for that PSA.
Amen.
So, Cory, so again, we're going to run through 9 of the points that we found that in our research were good points as, daily coping mechanisms for handling trauma. So the first one, they said basically, take care of yourself. What does that mean?
To be conscious that it's okay to put your mental and physical health first, especially in cases where people have dealt with trauma that they've had to somehow surrender their bodies or surrender, their mind just to deal with stuff. It is hard, to gain that, gain that trust of self back. So you take care of yourself, because it's true that self-care is self-love. Anyone that is preventing you from taking time to take care of you, I wouldn't trust them with my life. And also, I know the notes, and it is about eating healthy. There is a course I'm taking now for new specialty that deals strictly with nutrition and mental health. That's a big deal, and it's also important for us as African Americans, especially those who are adverse to taking medication. Okay, so if you don't want to take medicine, can I go in your fridge and pantry and tell you what to throw out and to replace? So which one is going to be? You either going to swallow this pill or you're going out to the giant. Which one are we going to do? It's also understanding that take care of yourself by what you choose in your life. That's the thing. Yep. Take care of yourself by who you choose and what you choose in your life. We also talk about this because sometimes when people experience trauma, there is a correlation between trauma and addiction, of various forms, or compulsions. We have sex, we have alcohol, we have drugs, we have gambling, we have online stuff. Stuff that I've dealt with on TV. Like that's a real thing. Like people are risking their marriages and everything else in their jobs just to, be in the gaming world because it's a safe place, but it's not reality, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
The second point talks about connectivity, reaching out to friends and families. That's a big one for me. Just a simple reaching out can make all the difference to a person's sense of feeling valued.
Well, I'm gonna look in the camera, look at my camera. Black men, it's okay to let us know what's going on in your life. Amen. And I say that because I had a conversation with Johnson & Johnson yesterday, and I said that the one problem I have is that I have to tell Black men I work with, it's okay to feel. It's okay to feel, and I don't want that power. Although I love what I do, right? But there are some things I wish I didn't have to do. Is to tell you it's okay to feel because you're human. As long as you have nerve endings and your brain is working the way it's supposed to, you are entitled.
Yep.
As a functioning human, because some animals can't feel what you feel. Some animals cannot even think and process the way that you do. So be grateful. So be grateful that you can feel, but make that a common conversation. And also because when we connect, So when we connect and we're able to get some sound advice or support, it also helps our bodies to also emit those helpful types of hormones that makes us feel better. It makes us feel more supported. Also, lastly, if you're the only perspective in your life that you're thinking of when you deal with something, the only thought that cycles in your head is your own.
Yeah.
But if you call me or you call Vash and we have two different opinions about the same thing, you now have options of ways that you can reconsider what you're going through. Yes, and what if we were okay with, and so what if what we thought helped you the most?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I wanna. We have a viewer who's been coming on weekly. Thank you so much, Oral Health. He said, or Oral said, I'm often reminded of my trauma when working with students that exhibit traits of mental poverty. I routinely do a mental check-in. I have to, and he also wanted to let Vash know that he's in Philadelphia. Okay.
Hey, Philly, go Birds!
I keep saying he, but Oral Health. I don't know who that is, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get the pronoun incorrect.
No, you're fine.
Okay. All right.
Right on. Well, I mean, sort of dovetailing what you were saying about people being able to feel emotions, it seems like this is a good one, which is to talk to children about what is going on. Because they may be feeling things that they don't know quite how to process. What are your thoughts on that?
This is very important because when I deal with all the traumas I listed, how come nobody knew my family? Why? Because now as an adult, I can say you guys didn't make it a safe space. So how you feel about that, not my business. But I had to deal with that in my life. So as a parent who's very intentional, and both of my kids have their own mental health needs as well. So I'm on the battle line every day and night. But I say that because we can't expect someone to turn 18 and all of a sudden know how to deal with life. If you never model those coping skills, my job as a parent is to first partner with my kids' emotions, tell them it's okay because it's a valid emotion, but how do we want to deal with that the next time? So maybe falling out on the floor at Target ain't your ticket, right? So right, because we got that look, right? No. So we can talk in the car. We can talk. We shape our children's ideas of communication when they become adults, because I tell my kids probably once every few months, I'm gonna love you so well that even if you get sick of me, you're not gonna pick anyone that will hear you less than I do. And so we shape that in the home. Yeah.
So I'm gonna keep moving because we got 5 minutes, and I want to make sure that we get to all of our points. Okay. The next one, Cory, is limit your consumption of news.
And I'm glad you said that because we were talking about social media earlier and you talk about the news. Sometimes it takes a deliberate effort to help yourself. And so for example, when we had all the police brutality, I used to tell my friends, why y'all forwarding me this? That's toxic. Well, I thought y'all should know. It's everywhere. You don't need to forward this to anybody.
Right.
And I told them, you are complicit in someone else's trauma possibly, and I'm going to hold you responsible. So then guess what? I either got blocked or they stopped sending me. I'm fine with that. I'm not going to be a party of hurting people and then asking them to pay me so I can help them.
Amen.
Amen, Cory. You go.
Well, okay. There's a money-making scheme going on there. You think about that.
Okay.
The next one talks about.
Right?
The next point talks about the importance of routine, making sure that you give yourself regularly schedule intervals of sleep and rest, and even fun activities that bring you joy.
Well, you said several points, but I'll make it quick. A routine really helps to deal with the symptoms of depression, but it also gives you a sense of value in your life. Meaning, I have stuff I can do, I can function well in. But also, just the fact that sleep hygiene is so important. And most people who deal with very evasive trauma have a hard time sleeping. Therefore, when they wake up, they're more agitated. Those memories don't process well because people don't realize that your memory is affected by sleep. So whatever you've experienced in that trauma, it's a jagged memory, and if you don't sleep well, it doesn't process well.
Wow. Thank you.
I hear that it's a good idea to avoid making major life decisions after a really seriously traumatic event. What are your thoughts on that?
Listen, it was I couldn't make any life decisions after my divorce. So that wasn't even trauma, but just saying, but that's very true because that trauma will influence all of your decisions. All those feelings, because guess what you're seeking? Comfort and peace or avoidance. So therefore, if you make these big decisions, and then let's say in 5 or 6 months, you're feeling a lot better. You got to look back at those choices of that person who's in your bed and realize, oh, I have to break somebody's heart because I only needed you because I was suffering.
Wow. Rebound.
And next they said, understanding that there will be changes.
There will. Most of my clients say two things to me. They say, I want my life the way it was, or I want to be normal. I say, well, those two things probably won't happen.
Right.
Because in order for you to stay safe, you have to remember something that has happened, right? Because if you forget everything, it makes you privy to suffer again. So there will be some changes of your alertness. There will be some changes, and you may have to understand everything that you used to do, you may not be able to do anymore.
Amen.
The final one, I think, is we wanted to look at is the importance of engaging with nature, and whether that's your animals and taking care of them, or getting out in nature when and where possible. My friends know that I love to go for what I refer to as an awe walk, where I just kind of take in the awe that is around me. Walking is therapeutic.
Well, Bobby, I'm going to ask you, because instead of answering the question and the way that you answered it, you kind of answered it. Being in nature is a way for you to form that gratitude. Because when I go outside, I know I didn't make that leaf. I know I didn't.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. And I'm glad I don't have to, because that's a busy job making all this stuff.
Amen.
But I get to be able to stand up and say, wow, there are wonders in this world that are outside of my suffering.
Absolutely.
That's the first thing. Also, sunlight is a natural mood enhancer. People don't realize that back in the day, the reason why we didn't have vitamin D deficiencies is because as kids, we were outside. We were cheerful. So I tell clients, if it's not, if the weather's not bad, or if you have movement in your limbs, just stand on your porch for 5 to 10 minutes and take in all that free natural healing, because I can guide you towards some free healing now. But you gotta want that. So yeah.
Amen. All walks. I highly recommend them.
All right, boss, you got the last one.
Well, what are some signs that people should look for either within themselves or in others that lets us know that we should seek outside help to deal with some of these traumatic things that might be going on in our lives?
Well, I think, the first thing is when it first happens, you have to deduce, can I manage? Because again, some people, they tend to recover on their own. But if you have high anxiety, if you can't sleep, if you're easily startled, like that little, the gunshot or the thing that startles you the most, if I touch your shoulder and you jump and you're trying to fight your way out, if you have if you have those evasive reactions, if you're having gut pains and body pains you did not have before, those are indicators that it's affecting you deeper than just the average type of situation, and you may want to look into some help.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Cory, we have gotten to the end of the show. I want to.
Yes, we did.
We did. We got through it. I want to thank you for coming on. For this episode of Crisis Management, because trauma is very, very important. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope there was something that you took away from Cory's commentary and all of his his expertise on dealing with trauma. Next Friday, November 3rd, Dr. Cordell Adams will be here. He is a well-known ophthalmologist and published author in Dallas, Texas. He will be here with us. And Randy Jones, a wealth management advisor for Financial Growth Partners, will be back to finish our conversation on crisis management as it pertains to finances. Okay, so our words of the week: when the past calls, let it go to voicemail. It has nothing to do with, it has nothing new to say.
Not a thing.
Not a thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, happy pre-Halloween to all of you. Okay. Thank you for joining our show tonight. Thank you, Cory, for coming on. I know you're busy. Love you, man.
Every time you text me, it's a yes. So
thank you, my brother. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight.
Thanks, everybody.
We will see you next week on a new episode of He Said.
He said. He said.
He said too tonight. Okay.
We said a lot tonight.
We did. Good night, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you so much.